Hey guys, today's interview is with Pree Walia of Preemadonna, which makes the Nailbot, which is a robotic nail printing kit to paint cool things on your fingernails. Pree's had a really entertaining and interesting journey. She went through Hacks Accelerator. She went on TechCrunch Battlefield. She was on Meet the Drapers, a reality TV show where people pitch the Draper family of investors. She's had a really interesting journey. She did a Kickstarter. She's kind of done it all. So this is a really fun one to listen to. If you like this kind of content, hit that subscribe button, leave us a nice comment below, and then email us at info@foundersuite.com, and I will send you a list of 581 women angel investors. This is a great list to start your hunt, especially if you're targeting women investors. So leave a nice comment, hit that subscribe button, email us info@foundersuite.com, and I will email you that list. Until then, enjoy the very entertaining chat with Pree.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Pree Walia of Preemadonna, makers of Nailbot, coming to us from Menlo Park. How's your day going?
Day is going. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I know it's taken a little while to get you on this show. I'm kind of excited to hear the story. So let's get right into it. What is Preemadonna/Nailbot?
Yeah, so Preemadonna, we're a tech startup. We're based here in Silicon Valley, and our big mission is to power creative expression, and we do it through interactive smart hardware. And so our first product is Nailbot, and Nailbot prints instant custom art on your nails in about 5 seconds. So think of it as like a mobile little mini printer or robot, with the whole goal to really automate nail decoration. And so we're using nail as that first vertical for Preemadonna to enter in creative expression, but I definitely have my eyes on some other categories as well. But we're really building at-home manicure fun devices called Nailbot.
Fun. Do you want to share other categories or we can?
Yeah, we can get into it. I mean, I think when you think of creative expression, for us, it really is, we're using nail as kind of the vehicle and gateway to the body. And so definitely think of tattoo and henna and kind of craft in that way.
Did you say tattoo? Or am I going to get a home tattoo kit that I can?
You will see. But it's, I think it's how we kind of look at nail as kind of that white space opportunity in creative expression. And it's really about what our customer wants, right? And what our community wants. Yeah.
I tell you, one of the fun stories about the pandemic, and I don't know if this is totally true, but apparently George Clooney cuts his own hair with a Flowbee, so maybe there's a Flowbee version that you guys could create, which would be kind of fun, right?
Yeah, I think to your point, that it's super interesting with the pandemic. I mean, I think the movement towards, at-home experiences for self-care, for beauty, or for personal care or creativity really, really holds true. And you've seen that as an accelerant.
Well, I'm imagining I can go on your site and pick out which nails I want. I want some Texas flag nails or something, get those done. I can imagine I could also go on, this is going to date me, but when I was a kid, I used to go to the barber shop and there was a poster on the wall and there was 12 different hairstyles from a flat top to a whatever. And you tell the barber, I want the flat top, right? I can imagine picking out, going to Preemadonna, picking out my hairstyle and then connecting my hairbot.
Yeah. To your point, it's super personalized, right? I think especially for all generations, but I think especially for Gen Z, that kind of instant gratification and that sense of personalization of that experience that they're consuming and hopefully co-creating is really important.
Interesting. So couple questions. Is Nailbot already out there shipping? Is it a kind of a socially connected thing, or is it like a standalone hardware device I'm purchasing? And am I just purchasing the hardware, or is it a subscription model or something like that? Couple questions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So we're in tooling and pilot production right now. So we're really excited for kind of the next chapter. We've had a couple successful beta programs, and now we've raised capital to really head into production tooling. So 2021 is an exciting year for us, and we've got a pretty extensive wait list as well. So if you want the Nailbot, go sign up on nailbot.com and get yourself on the wait list, because we will be converting that pretty soon. And then in terms of what kind of comes with the Nailbot. So the Nailbot, it's basically a small piece of hardware, and it comes with a starter cartridge, and we formulate the ink that's safe inside of the cartridge, and it comes with starter polishes and primers as well. And then you supply your smartphone, and you would download our app on iOS or an Android, on your iOS or Android based devices, and then you really can customize the art that you want to print. The starter cartridge does last for a significant number of prints. And then when you need more ink or more polishes, you can order within the app. The mobile app is free, but you can upgrade for more premium content. So we have recurring revenue streams from replacement consumables, and then also on the mobile. We also have some B2B brands and partners that pay Preemadonna to be inside of the mobile app.
That makes sense. Is there a user generated, can your community of nail people upload their own stuff?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's, you can really print whatever. Your nail is kind of a blank canvas, right? So you can print and design whatever you imagine, the only constraint of it being really your nail. And so, you can absolutely create your own art. You can share art with your friends. I think over time, we absolutely are opening up our marketplace for sharing and for selling. I think it's a phased plan to how we're doing that. But absolutely, we really view kind of that platform approach as a community-based approach for rewards and gamification and different types of even potential virtual currency. So a much bigger kind of platform play we have in mind for our art marketplace with applications even beyond nail.
Fun. What's your background, or where'd the idea come from / what's your background? Are you an engineer, or are you a nail salon operator, or you just, what is it?
Yeah. How did I get into nail decorating robots and Nailbot? I can tell you, I never really thought this would be my path when I was growing up. I actually, I went to college at Northwestern. I grew up in the South. I grew up in Louisiana, Mississippi. I went to college at Northwestern, and I was super into politics, actually. I was really into building campaigns from ground up. I was really motivated by someone's vision of the future. I think, I was young and idealistic, but that's the best time to be idealistic, right? Sure. And really passionate. And so I actually worked on a number of political campaigns all across the country, really building campaigns from ground up, both online and offline. And it taught me a lot of lessons, frankly, about entrepreneurship. And I think there's a lot of, you work at startups, but then there are other things that are like startups. And I think campaigns are like that. And then I ended up going to business school. It did take me out to Silicon Valley beforehand, working in politics. I went to B school at University of Chicago. In between my first and second year at B school, I worked at a startup, and we did LED lighting. And we manufactured in the East Bay and then also overseas. And, the magical thing about LED lighting and digital is you're really seeing the shift from analog to digital. And, it's smart automation, right? It's building automation. And I really thought I was going to stay in the building automation space for a number of years. To me, it was really fascinating. And so, but I learned a lot of lessons in connected hardware. I learned how to sell lights, how to fix lights, really the entire product development life cycle. And so I had this idea when I started to see all these LED dryers hit the market. They're meant to cure your fingernail. They were sold in home kits. It's kind of a dumb use case or a non-sophisticated use case, for LED technology. But, people were buying kits to paint their nail and then to dry it. And so there was this kind of, this pattern of there's a device and then subsequent consumables, right? It wasn't particularly sophisticated, but the inspiration was there. I was like, I'm going to build a Nailbot. I'm going to build this product category of nail decorating printers and robots. We'll start with art. We'll do full scale polish. We'll use the smartphone as the controller. Really bring the price point down. And then also create this art marketplace or content curation marketplace. And my mind kind of kept going from there. And Nailbot was formed. But I always knew that, I think in my days in building automation, it's really hard to build brand and community around, frankly, around building automation devices, right?
Sure.
Like it's kind of tricky, but in beauty, lifestyle, and kind of movements, if it's mobilized around something bigger, you can build a brand and you can build community. And so I really envision Preemadonna as this community of smart, dynamic, especially young women that were creating, sharing, designing, learning how the Nailbot was made, and really like powering company and powering our devices together. And so, yeah, that's kind of the formation of the company and kind of the vision. But I'd had a hardware background from working in early stage hardware startups. And then kind of our grassroots approach came from my days in politics and our kind of focus on young women. I was actually a gender studies minor in college. So I never actually thought it would kind of take me into a beauty startup or a beauty tech startup. And nothing in my background tells you that I would have started a beauty, startup. But it led me on this path.
That's fun. No, that's great. Fun founding story. All right, let's get to the point of the show of raising capital. So how much have you guys raised? And I know it's been over multiple rounds, so we'll get into that, but maybe let's start with that. How much have you guys raised to date?
Yeah, we've raised $5.6 million in overall funding to date.
And I know you did it in kind of tranches or milestones. So maybe talk about that process of raising. It's a two-part question. Try to make these questions not too complicated, but like talk about the process of raising money for a hardware startup, which has its own challenges, but also tranching it or doing it on a milestone basis. Maybe tell us that story, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, raising capital is a journey. It definitely was not necessarily an easy process for me, especially in the early days. So we really our first check was from an accelerator. It was from Hack's Hardware Accelerator. So we lived in Shenzhen. It really helped me understand how to build hardware at scale, gave us a good foundation, some credible backing. But then from there, frankly, I raised a little bit from friends and family. Hardware is capital intensive, right?
Yeah.
To go from your hacked MVP that you're kind of taking around, getting customer feedback, potentially crowdfunding with, to a full-fledged production-ready design that can go into tooling and manufacturing. There are multiple stages of what we call NPI. And
What's
I never raised
new
product introduction.
Okay.
So, there's just fundamentally, we never had that $5.6 million from day one to plan for the whole life cycle. And so what I did was I planned for a very specific engineering milestone. And, I had two strategies when I was fundraising. One was like for the whole amount, and the other was for a specific milestone.
Yeah.
And I was able to get cash and checks for each specific milestone. And with each milestone, each build, I was able to really test the market, make more progress to then reach that next milestone. And so overall, we raised 5.6. I like to say I'm like the 5-year overnight success story. It just took a while. But yeah, and so I'd say like along the way, what really mattered was having patient early angel investors, especially friends and family, and the accelerator, and then finding really, that early seed fund that was the right partner. And I think we found that in Halogen. They're one of our bigger backers. Jessie Draper's on the board of Preemadonna. She really believes in the mission. She believes in me as the CEO, and she loves the product. And I think those three have to really fit. And she had raised her fund at the right time as well, right? And since then, we've actually, we've clearly recruited other angel investors, other seed funds, and in our last round, the Amazon Alexa Fund also invested, which really, is a great thing for us. We're super pumped about it, especially as we look at our distribution strategy.
Yeah, no, there's so much exciting parts of that. On real quick on the milestone though, just to poke on that a little bit, did you kind of plan out all these milestones in advance? Like, here's our roadmap for the next 3 years, and then here's what I need for each step, or was it kind of as you hit each step? Yeah, I
mean, so we definitely had a very strong plan, but as we all know, when you start building, plans can sometimes go out the window. Everything takes twice as long and twice as much capital.
Yep.
Right. So I think I learned when we were, when I didn't very frankly, sometimes I didn't hit dates, and I didn't hit those cost targets. So then we had to really analyze, why didn't we hit them? What went wrong?
Yep.
What did we miscalculate? And I think showing and being very transparent and honest about that actually helped me raise capital for that next build or tranche. Because I incorporated the lessons from the previous build,
Yep.
right? So I knew to forecast a little bit more money, to allocate maybe more for mechanical engineering versus another, spin on the board, things like that. So yeah, we had both. We had a very strong plan to outline and say, this is how much we would need for each phase, to go from alpha 1 to beta 1.5.
Yep.
And then also behind the scenes, it's like, okay, well, if we wanted to then, do another rev of this product, or Gen 2 or Gen 3, this is then how much we would have. I think it sets us up really well for future capital raises, because in some ways, when you're really capital constrained, you have to be very creative, and so you don't have as much room to kind of play with. Your experiments are very, very calculated, and I think because of that, we've been able to do a lot with a little for a connected hardware startup.
You have, for the amount you've raised, which isn't a huge amount, and being in hardware, I guess one of the questions I was sort of thinking, is there almost a baseline amount of capital it takes to raise, to start a hardware startup? Like, if you're going into hardware, you need to be mindful of it, raising $5 million, kind of like that.
Yeah, I think when you have time, you don't have money, and when you have money, you don't have time. Right. And so I think, for us, when we raised in small tranches of capital, it was tricky because we had to be more precise than we would be if we had more money, right? You can make more mistakes with more money, or use more runway for those experiments. So to answer your question more succinctly, it really depends on the product that you're building and what you think is acceptable for for where you are. So if you're MVP, you can hack it together with you and a co-founder, or you're hiring a systems engineer, and you can get it done in 10K or 20K, and you just need to 3D print a couple parts. You use an Arduino Uno, your Raspberry Pi, great. And we all know it's a hack, right? I think you have to be very cognizant. It's like a hack. It's really just meant to show a proof of concept, maybe do something with it, maybe to raise more money, maybe to do a sample crowd. Maybe you can have 10 of them in the field or something like that. But it's nowhere near to get to tooling and to production.
Yep.
And then from there, what do you need in order to get that minimum viable product into production? There's probably 7 or 8 builds that need to happen. And it's just the complexity of the product that makes you have that capital allocation decision. And so for us, this was a capital intensive product. We have hardware, we have software, we have firmware, we have consumables, we're building a brand around it. So, I've had to be very, very precise with the capital raises.
Yeah, very interesting. Quick side question, the SOSV Hacks Accelerator, I've heard of those guys. I think we've had a few interactions with them. It sounds really cool. Do they actually, it's in China. So what's the program like? Do you apply to it and they sort of shepherd you around different factories or what?
Yeah. I actually applied twice. I didn't get in the first time. So we can share all of that and kind of my investor stories later, but Hacks has been super supportive. So the program's changed over the years. I think especially during, the pandemic, when it's very difficult to travel internationally.
Yep.
But at the time, you live in Shenzhen. They have a great office in Shenzhen. They give you access to industrial designers, to mechanical engineers, a couple of other resources on their team. And then they actually have relationships with different contract manufacturers in Shenzhen, in the greater, in mainland China, and you definitely do go visit. And so I think they definitely have distinct modules and different speakers and mentors that come in. But I do think being on the ground in Asia definitely helps if you're if you're a young CEO or not as seasoned of a CEO, and you want to be close to your product. You want to know who's manufacturing it. You want to know what questions to ask, and you want to feel okay if you have to land by yourself, in Shenzhen down the road and go to your factory, right?
Yeah.
So I think that really helps me as a CEO understand what that transition from your MVP from an early prototype all the way to production ready sample looks like. and the questions I needed to ask and the types of contract manufacturers that I thought would be the best fit for us, given kind of the complexity of our product. So all of the above. And then you also meet other founders and you share, you're all kind of living together, right? In Shenzhen, and you share best practices and you understand, and investors too, and you give each other advice.
Yeah, it sounds really, really cool. I mean, it sounds just amazing to go over and, be part of that. Could you, just really quickly on this, I don't want to get to some other topics, but could you go into that program? I know it's changed during pandemic, but if you just had a product idea, could you go into it? Or do you kind of have to go in being either an engineer or with a product background? If you just came in with an idea, would you totally be over your head?
No, I mean, I think the reality is, like, if you have an idea, even if you're not an engineer, that's fine. Like, I think you should have the hustle to figure out how to get your first prototype built, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a big proof point, is that, like, do you have enough chops in you to, like, break down it's problem solving, to break this down, to figure out how to get something to show, right? I'm a big fan of show and tell. Like, show and tell is everything. Like, show and tell can happen with a deck, and that's great. But show and tell for me did not happen with a deck. Show and tell for me, how I've had to prove, has always been with an experience, right? Something someone could physically touch. And so, we went in having tested. We had built some prototypes. We had actually done some nail parties and filmed them. Had some, like, kind of MVP customer feedback. Hadn't raised, I think, like $10,000, very little. So we did go in with I think everyone actually had gone in with a prototype, because I think at that point, even if it's the earliest stage, it's hard to then figure out how to improve upon the design or what to build if you're starting from scratch. Yeah.
Maybe talk about pitching this and maybe the show and tell component. I'm looking at your LinkedIn post, which is good, and we'll link to it. There's a great picture. I think it's Jesse Draper with painted nails. Like, would you use your product in pitch meetings? Would you bring it in and invite people to kind of try it out, or did you weave the product into the pitch at all? Maybe.
Oh, totally. I mean, everyone wants to try Nailbot, or like, I think this product actually looks very good in motion, right? Which I think is very clever. And there's, you never have to print anything that's the same, right? And it's very engaging. And so, I absolutely brought in every iteration of, like, our product. And I mean, when our Nailbot was huge, when it was like a very big MVP, I put it in, like, a little mini duffel bag. It was super heavy, and I would be, like, walking around. I was, like, running around meetings in San Francisco or New York in heels with this like prototype, going on the subways. It was all kinds of a disaster.
So cool.
Yeah, it was kind of embarrassing. I think I, like, literally, like, one part of my shoulder still hurts from it. Like, pretending it's so lightweight when it really wasn't. So I definitely demoed everywhere I could. And I mean, to be very frank, like, I almost would use this line to get meetings. It was like, give me 5 minutes, see what I built. Like, if you don't have 5 minutes, give me 90 seconds. And I would do a demo, and it's like, okay, you either got it and wanted to learn more, or you didn't like it. And so I actually felt like it was much easier for me with a show and tell than, like, hand waving a deck. Because then I think also people really appreciate the fact that, like, this person has a bit of hack and hustle in them, and also, sometimes a prototype broke and I'd have to fix it, like, in the field in front of them. It's like, okay, well, but I think that also kind of shows, like, this person cares a lot, like, they're going to make it work, even if it, like, the situation is not ideal. So we absolutely used, the experience of, like, printing live on investors' nails. Now it's a little bit different. I have been shipping out samples, potentially because of pandemic. So I think, we're lucky in where we are with our life cycle that we have a number of Nailbots, right? We're in production. I think in the earlier days, it's probably a little bit more challenging for a lot of hardware founders if you only have 1 or 2 samples. It's like, how do you, like, I think a lot of investors want to touch and feel a product sometimes before they invest.
Did you ever go in with the VC logo ready-made so you could print the VC logos on their nails or anything? That'd be kind of fun. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes I did. I'd say we get a lot of requests for, like, daughters, dogs, cats, children, husbands, right? So we can make it really personal. No, definitely. I get a lot of, well, we won't invest, but can I buy one? I'm
Right.
like, well, we'll put you at the end of the wait list then.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. How did you go about identifying hardware investors? Because that's kind of its own unique niche, right? So how did you sort of put together your target list and that stuff?
Yeah, I think Hacks is one of the best hardware investors, or SOSV. And so I think when we were applying to that hardware accelerator, I knew where maybe the weakness, where I was weak as a founder, or where I thought, I really needed to beef up, to go from like a red light to a green light in an investor's eyes.
Yep.
And frankly, on my team as well. So, so I think if anyone starts Googling, you can figure out who the best hardware investors are. There's so many lists. I think, you start cross-sharing with other entrepreneurs too.
Sure.
I actually think for Preemadonna, one thing that we've done very well is we have a good mix of hardware, like CPG, like, and female and kind of mobile, we have that combination,
Yep.
which I think is kind of defines the kind of company that we're building. And so once I felt like we had a number of strong hardware investors, like Helen Greiner, she invented the Roomba. She was president of iRobot. She's an early investor. She actually found me on Twitter. Like, we connected on Twitter. It was kind of random, but she's amazing. And I've learned so much from her. So I feel like we have a number of really interesting hardware investors, but then we have, with Halogen, she has a really keen eye on female consumer, which matters quite a bit for the company and the product. And then Version 1 is also one of our investors. I think they're one of their earliest or one of their only hardware companies. And I think definitely one of their only beauty. But they really focus on network effects and mobile.
Yep.
And if you think about what we're really, you had mentioned it, Nathan, can girls share and sell, and can you build a network? Can you really build network effects off of this experience? And the answer hopefully is yes. This is really where they saw that opportunity with Preemadonna. And so I think we have that right mix of like fashion, beauty, hardware, robotics, and mobile.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, a great answer, because it's not just, hey, I've got to go find hardware investors. I also can find fashion, beauty, female investors, network effect. Yeah, so kind of expanding your definition and pitch, right? So good. TechCrunch Battlefield, I saw you were you did that. Tell that story. What was that all about? How'd that play out? What was the net result of that, if anything? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, so we've had a journey, right? So when we came out of stealth at Battlefield, and with our huge prototype that I would like carry around that I was telling you about, and I will say it was like one of the best experiences of this journey, because I think in those days, like when we met in person way back when, feels like a long time ago, to have that experience of like launching your company and like your product on stage and making it to the finals. And we did demos live, right? So like it couldn't mess up. It was really exciting. I think it was basically this is who we are. And we learned a lot from that experience. We got a lot of inbounds, but to be very frank with you, like, we didn't raise money right away from that experience. Like it was hard for me. I definitely thought like, okay, let me take a step back. We couldn't raise more capital. Something was happening for whatever reason. The message wasn't resonating. And so I took a step back and was like, okay, what do we need to do? We launched a Kickstarter later, like the next year. And we actually had a number of other investors just like from me I just kept pitching. I know that sounds odd, but I just was like, I'm not pitching the right people. And I felt like I didn't know how to, I think people were looking at this as more like very young, toyish and not, I don't know. I didn't feel like I didn't have the right female angels. Like I barely had any female angels on my cap table. And I just was trying to find my advocates. And I think during that next 2 years, I probably pitched like 500 people.
Wow.
And then Jessie Draper, like, eventually, like she was raising her fund. She's like, you should come pitch on my show, Meet the Drapers. And we've been making slow and steady progress with small angel checks. And I pitched, she invested, and we were like, sorry
to interrupt. What's the form? Is it like a Shark Tank show, or is it more of a?
Yep. It's a Shark Tank show. It's called Meet the Drapers. It's on Sony Entertainment Television. And it's, you pitch in front of her. Well, I pitched in front of her, Tim Draper, and then her grandfather as well. And I think one other person.
Wow, fun.
Yeah. actually her dad, so Tim Draper invested through that show as well individually, or through his like Draper Associates LLC, and then Jesse led the round with Halogen Ventures. So that's my big break. TechCrunch just put me on the map. It really helped with SEO. If you literally Google Nailbot, we're everywhere because of it. But then I would say Meet the Drapers and Halogen gave us oxygen, basically, right? It allowed us to like actually build and move through those stages. And then Jesse introduced me to a bunch of other investors. I'm sure other entrepreneurs on your show have stated your first big investor, hopefully, right, isn't just a check, but they also introduce you to your network. And that's what happened for us. And so many of the other investors that I met that I was able to bring on board were from those introductions. So hopefully
that's so fun. That's so fun. I have a tiny anecdote. I think they still do it, I'm not sure, but the Drapers had Draper University. And this is 5 years ago. I was pitching to raise a seed round, and I reached out to Tim, and he's like, sure, come on down. Let's schedule a meeting. Come on down, and we'll do a pitch. It turns out he wants me to pitch him in front of his class of 50 students in Draper University. It wasn't a one-on-one meeting with him. It was pitching him in front of his entire university. And he did not end up writing a check, but it was still a really fun experience to kind of do that. So a minor version, a scaled down version of your Meet the Drapers.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, to Meet the Drapers was across from Draper University too. So
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But I love it. I think Jesse is probably the best fit as an investor for Preemadonna. And we've been able to build a really strong relationship. And she did take a board seat as well.
Okay. Meet the Drapers, you said what network is it on or what streaming service? Or?
Yeah. So if you just go to meetthedrapers.com, it's on Sony Entertainment Television.
Okay. Cool.
I believe it's still on Sony. They may have expanded into other networks as well.
That's so fun. All right. What have we not covered? We covered a lot already. Kind of as you're building a hardware startup, like how are you thinking of your overall your overall fundraising strategy? Like carrying that sort of milestone thing on, do you have a budget for the next like 5 builds and market dynamics? Really the question is, how do you sort of plan for fundraising for hardware, which is capital intensive? Like, have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you get through production, right? Once your product is really frozen in design, you've released for tooling, you don't have much changes. It's actually, I think, one of the bigger challenges for hardware startups and even beyond hardware startups is anyone holding physical inventory or having to manufacture something is really how to fund inventory, right? And I think it's a little bit different than maybe, software startups that, are on your show. But I think on this instance, I think entrepreneurs have a couple of different options. And this isn't, whether you're a venture-backed startup or not, this is applicable. It's, do you fund with equity diluting capital to fund your inventory? Hopefully not, right?
Yep.
Although I know some folks do. Longer term, do you fund with venture debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you fund with lines of credit? I think ultimately people want to say, oh, well, you can fund with, your customers. Mm-hmm. Yes, but likely you still have to place an order for those components and inventory in order for it not to be like a 6-month window for your customer to, or your audience or your community to get the order.
Yeah.
So I think as an entrepreneur, finding that right balance and like kind of exhausting all avenues. If your real channel is D2C and it is Shopify, or if it's Amazon and it's not like a big retailer where they may issue you a purchase order and help you front the inventory, if you have to figure out how to front that inventory and those components with long lead times, I think that is the most exhaustive working capital challenge, right? Moving forward. Which I view new product development can go for subsequent, more equity diluting raises, right? Mm-hmm. Clearly, Nathan, I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I had my eye on other verticals too, right? And creative expression. But if I'm looking at funding inventory, I think for us, it's really cleverly and creatively, leveraging lines of credit, working with our contract manufacturer, getting a little bit, getting some pre-orders and additional orders from our community. so all of the above. So I think for us, it's really that working capital challenge. And I think the best entrepreneurs can figure it out. And I look up to them. When I think of Sarah Blakely, she didn't raise any outside capital for Sminx. Pretty insane, right? You look at Robert Wang with Instant Pot. Amazing. He never raised any outside capital, right? And I think that story also really resonates really well with me, because I think subsequent fundraisers should go towards new product development and really kind of owning that creative expression space. I don't want it to fund inventory. And so I think, that's the challenge that I face right now, is as I look at the next 18 months, is how to fund inventory creatively.
But I love that framework of sort of like thinking of equity used to fund R&D / new product development, and then funding inventory. I guess, is this too simplified? It probably is, but I'll throw it out there anyway. If you have a long lead time and require buildup of a lot of inventory, maybe it makes more sense to go venture debt. If you have shorter lead times, maybe lines of credit are more applicable. Is that correct, or it's not really that simple?
I think it really depends upon where you are as a company. Like, as you have an accurate forecast, do you believe that you're going to be able to, how quickly are you going to be able to sell that batch of inventory, right? I think as entrepreneurs, sometimes I'm very optimistic. You can hear it in my voice, but I'm also realistic, right? And you never want to hold on to inventory, especially if you have a tech-enabled device that, you may be on your second generation, haven't sold the first batch, right? So you have to have that kind of careful balance on like when debt is due, if that makes sense, right? So I think, taking on venture debt, I think makes a ton of sense for a lot of companies. I think it's very dependent upon like your ability to sell through and when the debt is due, and what you've got in future product development, because you don't want the situation where you haven't sold your inventory, and you've over forecasted, and you're, the payment is due, right?
No, that's all good. Any insights or anecdotes about the Kickstarter campaign? Was it successful? Was it worth it? Would you do Kickstarter again?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big believer in the power of the crowd, just as a concept, right? So I think, having worked in politics, like there's no more accurate test of like the power of the crowd than like voting for someone, right? Period. In American politics, right? And so I really approach like Preemadonna in both ways. I think you need the power of the crowd, and you do need the support of some institutional investors to really catapult your product and your venture. And so I view Kickstarter, I view Republic, I view all these crowdfunding platforms as like amazing vehicles for entrepreneurs to really reach their customers directly and to build with them and for them. I think for Kickstarter, one thing I thought was unique was like close to 50% of our backers had never supported a Kickstarter before.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I think one that really taps into something that I believe is like, I think we are so privileged and have this unique opportunity to really build a tech company with and for kind of this next generation of young women, in a very fun way. Right. And I think because our target user may not be a traditional Kickstarter or equity, like crowdfunding platform user, I think we can drive them to be that, if that makes sense, right? So those are some interesting insights in that. I also think, I think where we are now, we're going to have a much more successful pre-order, just given like our product's ready for production, it's in production, and it's ready to go, and it's going to be an exciting 2021. But yeah, I'd say for any folks like thinking holistically about like, crowdfunding portals, I think it's a vehicle to reach your customer. I still think you have to do a ton of hard work behind the scenes, right?
That's what I hear. You have to kind of bring your own audience, and it's a great way to engage your audience, but you have to have your own audience and bring that audience along with you. Totally. All right. I'll let you off the hook in just a minute or two. Last question or two. What is your best tip for a founder doing hardware, trying to raise money for a hardware startup? Or if we've already covered everything, is there any advice you would give your younger self if you were doing this all over again? So multiple choice.
Well, maybe I'll do both. Okay. Advice I would give my younger self doing this again is, it sounds a little odd, but be kind to yourself. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's how you recover from them. It's how you learn from them. Nothing happens overnight. And if it does, it's probably not going to last for very long. That's like the other thing, right? I know I'm talking kind of in broad kind of cliches, but I really think that sometimes we're pretty harsh on ourselves as CEOs, and we need to be. We need to be held accountable. But I think there is this element of like learn and move on, because that's going to, you know, I've been going at this for a while. And if I just beat myself up off of every mistake, the company would be dead, right?
Sure.
So that's one. And then the other was, remind me again, it was
just any other tips for hardware startup founders, advice that we haven't covered, if there is.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I think the people that I have learned the most from, that I trust the most, are the exact opposites of me. Right. And so I would say, I think sometimes we have a little bit of an ego, and when we're starting out, as to like, who is that real strong complementary force? Maybe they're quote better than me in like certain areas, and they should be. And so I've actually, like, some of the folks that I've hired over the past 18, 20 months, very different in personality type, very different in skill set, you know, very strong mechanical engineers, very strong on ops supply chain, you know, very different personality. I'm clearly high energy, move very quickly. Having someone more methodical, more thought-provoking in certain areas is a really good compliment to me. And don't be afraid of it. So I would say that's, like, in some ways, maybe seek that out, because it brings you a lot of balance that you maybe haven't seen before.
Definitely. Good. All right. I'm going to let you go, but people want to learn more. What's the best URL to point them to? And can they sign up on a wait list?
Yeah. Actually, the easiest one to remember is go to nailbot.com, nailbot.com, put in your email, and you will get notified when you can pre-order.
Will you hit the Christmas season, the holiday season? Or...
We hope so. We think so.
Cool. Excellent. I'll show my 10-year-old daughter is starting to get really into makeup. She's not really doing nails yet, but she's really into makeup all of a sudden. So I'm sure she'll be a future customer.
I hope so. It's a fun experience. But Nathan, thank you for having me, and hopefully this was helpful for your audience.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Over and out.
Right.
Bye.
Take care.